Hi, welcome to today's Understood Chat. We are here to talk about helping kids with homework today. So thank you for joining us. We know it's kids have been back to school for a bit now, and homework is probably coming in quicker than it was maybe a month ago. And we want to see what we can do to help kids with learning and thinking differences when they're being challenged by homework. And today with us, we have Kristin Carothers, PhD, and many other things. And so, Kristin, thank you for being here. And could you tell our audience today a little bit about yourself and your expertise?
Perfect. Thank you for having me. I'm Kristin Carothers. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist who specializes in work with children, adolescents, and adults. My primary focus in terms of my expertise is in working with people who struggle with attention issues, ADHD, learning problems, and also behavioral issues. I'm based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and I also spend time in New York City, and I'm licensed in both states.
Awesome. We are so grateful that you are spending time with us and our audience today because we know homework can be really stressful, not only for kids, but for their families.
Yes.
And so we're just going to dive right in with questions. But first, before I do that, I'm going to tell the audience a little bit, if it's your first time watching with us, how this works. Whether you're watching on our website or on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you happen to be watching, there will be a comment section on that platform. If you want your question answered, please type it in there. We've got a team monitoring that. And any sort of kind of supporting information you can give us will really help Kristin in her answers. So giving us an age, if they have a learning or thinking difference, things like that will help us give you the most personalized answer to your questions. In the meantime, if you don't have a question yet, feel free to just say hi, greet other people in the chat, things like that. And again, thank you for joining us. With that being said, our first question for you today is, what are some of the reasons that kids might struggle with homework or avoid doing homework?
Okay, so I think there are a number of reasons kids avoid homework or might struggle to get it done. One of the reasons could be just that they're tired after the school day. So they've been in school, they've been expected to moderate their behaviors, to stay on task. And by the time they get home, all they want to do is escape. And that could be because they're tired. That could be because the work is difficult for them. It could be that they don't see the point in completing a task. I think when I talk to parents about homework, most often I ask them to think about their own experiences with homework. Were they the type of child who avoided homework? Did they find homework difficult? So that they can kind of empathize with what their kids are going through. But I think there can be many reasons that kids avoid. If they think they won't be successful in completing the homework, or they just don't want to complete the homework, they may give their parents a harder time when it comes down to getting it done.
You have perfectly set us up for the next question, and I think I'd love for you to expand a little bit. You said one of the reasons they might not think they think they might not succeed at homework. That can be really intimidating. But how should parents or caregivers react when their child is refusing or avoiding homework because of some of those reasons you just mentioned?
Mm-hmm. I think it's always good for parents to try to empathize and to get kids to explain more. So before talking about consequences or explaining why it must be done, I think it's a good idea for parents to get a little bit more information from their children about what the homework experience is like for them, or what the actual activity that they're expected to do is like for them. So for instance, if a kid comes in and automatically they start to complain about the fact that they have homework, the parent might just empathize and say, I totally understand that you've been at school all day and you're ready to play. I felt the same way when I was your age, or for me, explaining a little bit of their perspective, but then saying, tell me a little bit more. Is it that you are tired? Or could it be that you think you've got too much homework to do, or that you don't understand the work? Let's figure this out. And once parents allow kids to give them some more information, it might help them to be better at problem solving around the homework situation.
I think it's really something that we talk about a lot here on Understood is figuring out the root through conversations with your child, and figuring out really what is it that's driving behind these behaviors, and understanding the mindset they're in. Because depending on where your child is, different approaches and different strategies are going to help you figure that out. And we've talked a lot about, sometimes kids just need a break, or they need to take a walk, or things like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Our next question is what about kids who are willing to sit down and try? So they probably want to be successful. They might be interested in this homework, but then they become frustrated because they don't think they can do it, or it becomes too hard or overwhelming.
I think it's really important in those situations that parents structure the homework environment so the kids can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So think about when we have our own projects or tasks or reports that have to be written for our jobs. Sometimes you sit down to get started, but then there's a block because you think you won't be successful or something gets frustrating and you can't figure it out. So in order for kids to see the light at the end of the tunnel, sometimes it's nice to break that homework into chunks and to give frequent praise while the kid is doing the homework about the fact that they sat down to do the homework, that they are trying their hardest, that you understand that they're frustrated, that that's completely normal. And that one of the things to do sometimes when we're frustrated is to acknowledge we're feeling frustrated by the task and to maybe take a step back and to either seek help, walk away, or try to come up with a plan with somebody to help them. Depending on the age of the kids, this can be really tough. So younger kids might have more difficulty with frustration tolerance and they might blow up or give up more easily. Or for a kid who struggles to stay on task or struggles to stay focused, they might be more likely to give up quickly. And so I think one of the things to do is instead of waiting until the problem arises, to have a conversation with your kids before the problems occur, to say, okay, here's our homework time. We're going to spend 15 minutes on homework, 2 minutes off homework for a little body break, 15 minutes back on homework. If during your homework completion time, you notice there's something you don't know how to do and you feel yourself getting frustrated, I'm here to help. Or your sibling might be able to help you. So planning ahead of time and then giving them something to look forward to once they're through the tunnel. Once homework is done, you'll be able to have your 15 minutes of playtime or whatever amount of time you can allot for them to be able to do something that's fun.
Awesome. I think that's really helpful, being able to structure it. That light at the end of the tunnel is so important. They don't want to feel like they're bogged down in homework for forever.
Yeah.
All right, we have questions rolling in from our viewing audience, and so I'm going to dive into those. This next one comes from Joanna, and her question is, my 11-year-old is loving middle school, and I'm so grateful. She has just started taking some tests, and I'm having trouble communicating the message that she should push a little more while letting her know that perfection is not necessary. Lately, her comeback is, it doesn't matter, and it doesn't have to be perfect to C is fine for me.
Okay. Thank you for your question. So it seems that you would like your daughter to push for those A's and B's, and your daughter is okay with getting the C's. I think one of the things that is hard to figure out is whether or not your daughter feels invested in that particular subject, where maybe she's gotten the information that a C is good enough or why is a C good enough for her. But sometimes those conversations with parents can turn into like power struggles. And one of the things that you really want to avoid is creating a power struggle or another source of contention for parents and children to get into, especially around the middle school age. And so one of the things that I would think about is trying to build in some reinforcers for those A and B scores. And maybe you might say, well, I know that you said a C is good enough for you, but I'm also thinking about you being able to get into the best high school and what college will be like. And sometimes we need some help to get motivated around academics if it's not what is intrinsically motivated for us. So I do know of situations where parents have said to kids, if you could at least pull this C up to a B, we can work on some rewards linked to your hard work. Not every kid is going to be intrinsically motivated to get A's and B's. Some kids will need some more external forces, some more extrinsic motivation in order to build their motivation. And what I want to caution adults against is thinking that if you reinforce your kids for positive behavior or for good grades, that you're paying them or that it's like a bribe. Remember, there are things that all of us are intrinsically motivated to do, and they're different. The example I always give is I'm not intrinsically motivated to go to the gym, but if there's an external source of support there, like a peer who's pushing me to go, or I'm going to get paid to go, I'm more likely to go. I'm more intrinsically motivated to sit down and read, but everybody is different, okay? And so one of the things that it might be nice to do is to build a system, put a system in place for your daughter where you set the goal of, you want a C, I want an A, middle ground is a B. If you can get these C's up to B's, we're going to work on making sure that for every B that you get, we do a special outing. Or it doesn't have to be something necessarily that costs money. It could be time, it could be a privilege.
Yeah. I love that. And I also think, too, as far as the perfection is not necessarily necessary message, you don't want your kid to burn out. And you want to say, you know, what is the level that you can study? What's the level of work you can put in without hitting your limit and exhausting yourself? And so kind of having those conversations around you know, don't do the bare minimum. We want to push yourself a little, but I do want you to tell me when it's becoming too much. And so we can work and find a plan for that.
Yeah, and keeping those conversations positive. So, you know, instead of, you know, you could do so much better and giving a backhanded compliment, like, oh, you got to see, but I know you could do better. Or we want to avoid backhanded compliments. I'm very proud of you. And I know that you are really bright and I've seen you do excellent work. And I just love when I see you working so hard. So just keeping it positive, pushing them forward, not giving backhanded compliments can also motivate them.
Awesome. And Joanna says, thank you. So
thank you, Joanna.
Our next question comes from Alex. And Alex is wondering how long they should expect their 13-year-old to be able to sit and work on homework.
Okay, this is a tough question because depending on the type of school he is in, around 13 is when the homework, the amount of homework that's required by schools can be pretty large. And so I know of kids who are sitting from 2 to 4 hours. I think that is a bit unrealistic for kids who are in mid-adolescence because there are other areas of development that we also should focus on. I think it's reasonable to ask a kid to sit for 30-minute chunks of time, 30-minute periods at a time, and then be able to take a break. There are some kids who can power through for a full hour because they really want to get through everything. I think 30 minutes at a time is enough. So if you think of a TV show, a typical sitcom, they're 30 minutes in length with some commercials interspersed. Our attention spans are not very long, and that's for entertainment purposes. So when we're not doing something that's entertaining, our attention span might not be as long. So I think if you're thinking of 2 hours over a period of time where there are breaks, that's reasonable. I think 2 hours straight is a little bit long.
I think that's helpful. And we talk a lot about like chunking, looking at, you know, the homework that they have for the evening and how can it be broken up into different sections and what happens between those sections. Do they get a snack? Do they get to take a walk? Just to kind of help them not feel as stressed in that full block of time.
Yes.
This question comes from Bree. And Bree wants to know if you support adding an accommodation to a 504 plan or IEP to be opted out of homework. She says, I cannot deal with the stress and I don't feel like the homework is helping her.
Ooh, this is tricky, Bree, and I'm not going to let you get me on the record for this one. But what I would say is that if you notice that the homework is leading to power struggles between you and your child, or that it's making your child feel even more impaired or not as good as other kids when they are getting the homework back or they're not able to get through it, that one of the things you might consider is assigning homework tasks to a tutor or a babysitter or somebody else besides yourself who can manage getting through the homework with your child. My biggest concern about homework is when it leads to negative interactions between parents and kids. I think we've got enough stress in our daily lives that we don't need it to be an additional stressor. And if you have a kid with learning difficulties or learning differences who's resistant and who's not able to get through the homework and you don't see an academic benefit, that maybe instead of just taking it off the table fully, you have someone who is assigned to work with your kid to get through that homework. I think nothing beats a failure like a try. It might be worth it to have a conversation with the student support team at your school to find out if having homework due in a chunk at the end of the week is possible. I don't know whether or not most schools will allow you to take it away fully if that's not a part of like the school's cultural identity. But I do think it's worth having a conversation with the teachers and student support team about the utility of the homework and if there are more creative ways that you all can get it done for your kid.
I think that's really helpful. Always remember that you're not in this alone. There are teachers and advisors and people who hopefully want to see your child succeed just as much as you do. So reach out to those resources. And even we've heard a lot of stories here at Understood of talking with other parents who are going through similar situations, other families who might be experiencing similar struggles, and asking for advice and tips of what they experienced and how it helped them. We have an incredible community here on understood.org, u.org/community, and that's another great place to go for resources of real life experience. Our next question is a little bit similar to the last one, but Chris is asking how much homework is too much homework for a child with ADHD?
Okay. I think every child is different in terms of their ability to push through homework, ADHD or not. And so, what I would think about is the amount of time that your child can sit and get it done. So, I won't say that like five homework items are too much. What I would say is that you want to look at the amount of time that you're spending and how long that child is able to sit and focus. And you're going to have to build that time up for your kids. So I don't have a great answer for that. I think anything over 2 hours is too much. So if you're spending 2 hours or more than 2 hours an evening on homework, I think that's really tough, and that can be hard on kids and parents. So think about it. If you get home at 5:30 and then you haven't had dinner, you haven't had baths, you haven't had a time to do some free time, and you've got 2 hours of homework to work in there, that pushes you back to 7:30, 8 o'clock. And then we want to think about bedtime. We want kids to get at least 8 hours of sleep. We want them to have some downtime. And so I'm concerned when there's more than 2 hours worth of homework for that kid to accomplish. So that's how I'll give it to you. Periods of time.
I think that's really helpful. Our next question comes from Blair. And Blair says, I have a 13-year-old daughter who struggles with keeping up with homework or even getting started. She keeps telling me to, and this is in quotes, trust her. When I do that, she gets several missing assignments. How do I trust her? She's very defensive from constant criticism and judgment.
Okay. So I'm going to take the last part of that comment, criticism and judgment. She thinks she might believe that you think she's not responsible. And she wants to prove to you that she's responsible, but her behaviors in the past have led you to have some evidence that she struggles with being able to stay on top of assignments. One of the things that I would say to your daughter is that I'm here to help. And what we've noticed in the past is that when we don't have a structure for keeping up with assignments, they get left behind. So I'm going to start by helping you to structure. I'll check in twice a week about whether or not your assignments have been turned in. And so a lot of school districts are using the web where parents can check in. I would say you tell her you're not going to micromanage, but you are going to manage to some extent because you're a parent. And so you do have that right. And as you manage twice a week and you see that she's meeting goals and submitting assignments, you'll taper down to once a week. Okay, but you're always going to do a once a week check because as a parent, it's your responsibility to stay on top of her homework. And eventually you'll have it where she decides how she'd like to present that information. So maybe she can choose the time of the week where she's going to come and you all are going to have a conversation about what's been turned in. But I think just like we have kids do checks with their social medias and their apps and phones, kids do need to have some accountability time with parents, at least 2 checks a week from parents. And you can let them know that it's not a personal attack, it's a support.
Yep. I really do think that partnering with your child and telling them that you are there to support and help them figure out solutions. You're not going to hand them solutions, but the two of you can work together to find out what works.
Yes.
This next question comes from Dawn.
Okay.
And Dawn says, how do I help my perfectionist child who won't even start her homework because she's convinced she'll get something wrong?
Okay, so for a kid who's really anxious and perfectionistic and is afraid to approach an activity, we typically praise them or reinforce them for even little steps. Okay, so the goal is to not give in to her avoidance. The goal is to not give her avoidance a lot of attention, but to scaffold her behavior. So break them down into the smallest step. First step is just sitting at the table and looking at the homework. Thanks for sitting there and looking at it. I'm here with you to try. I'm going to set a timer and I want you to do the first problem. She starts to say, well, I'm not going to get it right. What if I get it wrong? You say nothing beats a failure like a try, or all I want you to do is try. And then as a parent, I want you to move away. Because sometimes these anxious behaviors can be reinforced by parents without us intending to reinforce. You're trying to decrease her anxiety by talking her through it when you might actually reinforce the chances that she's going to continue to talk and continue to avoid because she knows she has you there as a support. So we want to reinforce itty bitty steps. She sat and she looked at the assignment. Thanks for looking at it. She got through one problem. I love how you got through one problem. And you also want to normalize making mistakes. No one is perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. Mistakes are a part of the learning process. If we don't make mistakes, we can't grow, or there's not the opportunity for people to teach us anything. It's okay to make mistakes. She's going to have difficulty tolerating this initially, but you got to give her that same information. So when she's playing at the park or engaged in another activity that has nothing to do with homework, you would say, I love how persistent you were. Thank you for trying this, even though you weren't looking forward to it. I'm really impressed with your bravery. So those types of specific praises throughout the day could help her with homework.
I love that you said praise even the smallest steps that get them on the right path to like getting the larger task done, and also normalizing mistakes. It's something that I think we all struggle with throughout our life, and so telling them, it's not just you, it is everyone. It's it's going to happen, and there's something that can happen after the mistakes happen. We can talk about it. We can look at solutions. We can figure out how to take next steps after that. This next question comes from Cedar.
Okay.
And Cedar says, my daughter is in 6th grade and she has dyslexia. What suggestions do you have if homework is above what her ability is, such as a research paper that's 5 to 6 pages long? And the mother says, or the Cedar says, I'm also hoping to get her using assistive technology, AT.
Okay, so I think first step is to talk to the teacher educating the teacher about the difficulties that she's having based on her learning difference. Also educating the teacher about the possibility of using assistive technology to get her through those assignments, and then working towards accommodations. So what I would want to know in this case is there an individual education plan in place for a specific reading disability or specific writing disability? If there isn't a specific plan in place that is an individual education plan, the parent might want to consider going to the school district and having that process started, because there are accommodations that can be made based on the child's ability or difficulties. I think assistive technology would be a great way to get your daughter or your child through this process. And maybe, but first, have a conversation with the teacher about tapering down the assignments from 5 to 7 pages, maybe to 4. And then building her up over time with the goal being 5 to 7 pages by the midterm or by the end of the year.
Yeah. I think it's so important that parents try to build relationships with their students' teachers, because they really are going to be an advocate for your child. And if a teacher who has many students doesn't necessarily know or have that IEP in place, they won't be able to understand what's going on with your child. And I think most of them want to. They want to be able to help you, help your child thrive. Our next question comes from Michelle. And Michelle has an 8-year-old son who goes to after-school daycare where they have, and this is in quotes, homework time. However, when he does it there, half of it is done wrong, and then they have to spend time at home correcting. Obviously, this is frustrating for him because he already did his homework.
Right.
So what are some ideas to combat this? And she even goes as far as to ask, do you recommend hiring a private tutor at daycare?
Ooh, okay. The issue with having to redo homework after it's done at after school, where there's not necessarily a person there to check it, is one that comes up a lot. I think one of the things to tell your child is that you're getting started on homework at after school. And the reason you're calling it getting started is so that, one, there's not so much to do, quite as much to do when you get home, but 2, there's nobody there who can check it or who can make sure he's doing it right. And so one of the expectations he might have is that you get started at after school and you do what you can there, but you finish with mom at home so she can make sure that it's correct. Now, I think in terms of hiring a private tutor to do it with the kid during after school might be difficult for the people who run the after school program. So I want to check with them first to make sure that it's something that they're okay with. If they're okay with somebody coming and meeting with him during the after school time, and then that would take away that later homework time with you guys in the evenings, I think it would be a great idea. If the after school program is not open to having another adult on the premises during that time for whatever reason, then I think you're basically letting your kid know you started after school. You do it as well as you can and as neatly and completely as possible. And then mom does a check. And if there's something that is not either neat or complete or correct, then you all are going to edit it when they get home. So that's a tough one, but I think a lot of parents face it.
Yeah, and I really do think that's really a helpful reframing of it, because the kid might think that that was homework time and now they're getting doubled up on homework time.
Right, right.
And so helping them understand kind of the process and the structure might make it easier and lessen those emotions of feeling like they're having to do it over.
Double duty.
Yep, absolutely. This next question comes from Kathy. And Kathy says, my grandson is in 7th grade and has ADHD. I am constantly working with him during homework, practically every minute. Is this wrong? Is it doing more harm for him in the future? And how much homework is reasonable for one who has focus and staying on task problems?
Okay, I think what's most important is that you see what he can do on his own. It's almost, Kathy, like you need to do an assessment of what can he accomplish on his own. And then you're going to come in and provide support to figure out where he needs your assistance. So it may be that he needs support just sitting down to get started. So you get started with him, but then you try to figure out how much he can do on his own, and then you come back and do a check later. I think it's good to do this assessment because there are times when kids may be able to do more than we think they can do, but they're so accustomed to having our assistance or having us right by their sides that they then become dependent on us. And so what we want to do is to increase his independence level over time by doing a mini assessment for about a week. You help him to get started, and then set a timer, 15 minutes, see what he's done, let him take a break. Set another timer, 15 minutes, see what he's done, let him take a break. Do this over a period of an hour for a week-long period. And I think it'll give you a good idea of what he's able to do by himself. It might be that he can breeze through the math homework on his own, but the reading is more of a challenge. And so then you'll know where you need to intervene with him. It also lets him know that he can be independent in some of his homework completion. And really, we're working towards independence and skills for all of our kids, whether or not they have ADHD. And like I said, as a rule of thumb, I think 2 hours or less of homework is more than enough. In my own life, I would prefer not to have more than an hour, but I'm not there yet.
I think that's really helpful, the assessment of, if you've always been a part of the process, you don't know what he can do on his own. And so stepping away for moments to really see, and it also might help you see where the hiccups are happening. Is it always in a certain subject that you're seeing that he can't focus? I think we have time for about one more question, and so I'm going to leave the last question from Ola. And Ola says, good afternoon. My son was very good at doing homework before, and now it's a struggle. Can you advise on how to help? And I think we often see and understood as children progress in school and subjects get more difficult, this isn't an unusual question from parents.
No, I think Ola, you're going to have to do an assessment as well, figuring out what happened. Is it that the work has gotten more difficult? Did he get some he or she get negative feedback on an assignment they submitted? Are they hearing that other friends don't have to spend as much time at homework and they want to get to some extracurricular activities? It's going to be really important that you try to get to the root of what's making your child avoid. Once you get to the root, or even if you don't get to the root, I think it's really important to build in a system of reinforcement for your kid, letting them know that they can do the homework because they've done it before, acknowledging that it could possibly be more difficult than it previously was, and also acknowledging that you're there to help them, but you want them to get started. And I'd also kind of try to make sure that they know that there's a concrete amount of homework time. And once they finish and they do it neatly, completely, and correctly, there's going to be an opportunity for them to play, engage in some social activity. You might play a game with them for 5 minutes, but they need to know that it's a finite period of time. And once they get finished with it, there's something to look forward to. And we also want to tie it for them to grades. So remember, homework is a part of your grade. It's an expectation your teacher has. Once you meet it, I'm able to let you have some fun or let you engage in an activity with me because you work so hard. So we're really trying to encourage persistence and tackling tasks, even though they're things we would prefer to avoid.
Absolutely. That was the last question we have time for. Kristin, do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share with our families out there who might be watching today and wondering about homework?
Yeah, I just think that parents should know that the understood.org website is a wonderful resource for getting through these difficult issues, that there are tons of articles and other information that are available on the website. I want parents to know that you're doing the best that you can. Nobody expects you to be perfect. Teachers may have to understand if all of the homework doesn't get in, but what's best is to kind of form a partnership with teachers so that you are reinforcing what they're doing in the classroom and that they know there's some homeschool communication, because homework sometimes is a form of homeschool communication. The teacher says, this is what we're doing in the classroom. I want you to see that at home. So try to kind of reframe your thinking and think about it that way. If you notice that it's leading to major power struggles between you and your child, I think that's the time to seek help. We don't want you to have an even more difficult time with your child when you've been away all day from them. And we want to have as many positive experiences as possible. So hang in there, and please just use the understood.org website as a reference.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your time, and thank you to everyone who spent time with us today watching and asking questions. We know that these are quick, and if we didn't get to your question, I really encourage you to take your question and ask it on understood.org/community. We have experts like Kristin who are in that space answering question, as well as other families who are experiencing similar things to what you are going through. And so we really want to be there for you and provide the resources, and also maybe just throw a quick search on Understood to see if we've got something written up that could help you. Please check out our calendar at u.org/calendar and see what other expert events we have coming up. We encourage you to join us for those. And thank you again. Have a great day.
Have a great day.